right, everybody, welcome to Monday's Expert Interview. Man, if you only knew how this day was starting off, you're going to love it, though, either way. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. You are using it in your daily life in ways you may not even realize. It's going to fail, but not the way you think. What does this mean for the construction industry? Today, we welcome our guest, Hugh Seaton, host of the Constructed Futures podcast and CEO of The Link. He believes the labor shortage is a problem we are not going to solve, that we need to look at the process and technology to improve productivity and efficiency in construction, not waste our time looking for workers that do not exist. Technology has become the cornerstone of the built environment. It is the AECO community ready to embrace the full potential of AI and build for tomorrow. That's what we're going to talk about in just a few short moments. But first, we need to thank all of our sponsors. So let's give a big shout out to them right now. Stream Modular, the only logistics company you need to transport your mods, pods, and panels. Our friends at Stream Modular are investing $50 million over the next 25 years to build the technology, solutions, and trailers needed to handle and transport the projects of today and meet the demands of tomorrow. Reach out to their team at streammodular.com to discuss your next project. CombiLift is the largest global manufacturer of multi-directional forklifts and straddle carriers, a leader in long load handling solutions, offering a free warehouse and site optimization design service. CombiLift helps companies of all sizes and from every industry maximize the capacity, safety, and efficiency of their warehouse and storage facilities. A big thank you to Paul Short and the team at CombiLift for helping us all to build it better. Visit them at combilift.com. Brave Control Solutions, where offsite manufacturing systems that do more than just improve productivity. They have a unique approach to industrialized construction, a lineup of flexible automation systems specifically designed for the construction industry, empowered by CAD to Fab, and turnkey solutions for 3D volumetric assembly, structural insulated panels, finished wall assemblies, MEP component processing, assembly, kitting, and storage. Learn more at thinkbrave.com. All right. Again, thanks to all of our sponsors. Make sure you go and pay them a little attention and some love and check out all the awesome services they offer, because we cannot do this without them. With that said, let's hop right into it and let's bring Hugh on the show. Hugh, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, right before the show here was kind of funny, right? We're getting ready to start the show and all of a sudden smoke alarms are going off. So we're having to deal with them testing everything. So we do apologize. We're a little bit behind the times, but we're going to hop right into it, Hugh. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? In fact, Hugh, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born to this very moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital, or we will call Paul on the show. And I bet Paul has some good things to say about you, but you only got 2 minutes to do it. The floor is yours.
Well, it was a rainy day in White Plains. No, I'm kidding. So I spent about 20 years in advertising. Actually started my career in Greater China, translating, of all things, this was in Taiwan, specifications from English into Chinese. And actually skip ahead maybe a decade from that, and I met Paul Doherty, who you're referencing, in Shanghai as I was helping him sell BIM services into China, as one does. But more relevant to today, I started a company in the mid like 2016 or so, where we did a bunch with AI, specifically deep learning, and have done a number of things since then, which have got me pretty close to how things really work, how you turn it into products, not just worrying about bias or worrying about some of the top line things that people often talk about, but actually how do you make this into a reliable product that people can use. And I spent about 3 years in the Construction Specifications Institute, and have recently launched The Link, which takes specifications and makes them consumable for the field using some AI, using some of the more recent AI, the large language models, as well as some kind of classic software. So for me, and I speak about this honestly as much as I can, I think this is really an opportunity for the industry to address some of the shortfalls we have on the labor side, but also just leap ahead and really, reduce some of the risk that documents create, as well as really kind of see how we can solve some of the issues of efficiency and of design and so on that really hold us back.
Yeah, so you literally wrote the playbook, on construction technology. Can you tell us a little bit about what that book is all about and really where you were going with that? And I think that's going to lead us into the link, which is the link.ai, if anybody wants to look that up. And we'll share that with you during the show too.
Yeah, and I, so I wrote a book. We published it at the beginning of 2021 called The Construction Technology Handbook. It was out of Wiley. The point of that book was really to get people comfortable with the terms that get thrown around a lot. So I find it when startups and even not so startups talk about technology, they skip over things. Like they assume everybody on the call or in the conversation knows what an API is. Most people don't. It's just you hear the word and you think, oh, I don't know, it's connecting a thing to a thing. So I spent a lot of time in that book defining things, talking about it to smart people who don't spend all their time thinking about software and technology. So you're armed with the terms and the ideas to make better decisions and really think about how in your process and in your job, you can use some of these things or say no to them from a place of comfort and sophistication instead of, I don't know, I've never heard of that before and I don't have time for it today. So that led to, actually, since then I had a podcast, which is, a weekly thing, talking to people in sort of the same vein. Is what does your company really do? How do people use it? And so on. And the final thing I'll add that speaks to what you were getting at is once a month, we have an AI webinar. And again, the point of it is explaining these things to people who don't have a lot of time to spend on it so that you can make good decisions or at least feel like I've got my handle on this and I don't need to worry about it today. Thanks, Hugh. We'll move on. So all of that to me is, I think this is a fantastic industry loaded with people that really know what they're doing that doesn't include software and technology. So how do we bridge the gap so people can assess these things on their own terms and not have to hope they're right?
So software, technology, data, I mean, it's not new, but it's new to the construction industry in the way we're seeing it today. And now you layer on AI on top of it, right? That is really, really new. Are you seeing companies really struggle with how this works for them and how they use it in a way that makes sense, whether you're a small company or a large company?
I think there's a couple of layers to your question. I come across individuals and companies who have more insecurity about AI than I wish they did because they hear about it. They're concerned about it. Lots of people have, manufacturing friends who lost their jobs during the kind of the period between about 2004 and now. And there's a concern that this is going to happen in construction. I don't think it will, but nevertheless, it's a valid thing to feel concerned about. And we hopefully by conversations like this, we can give people a comfort level that something's changing. It's changing faster than anything in my 30 years in technology, but it isn't coming for your job. It's actually looking to augment and automate parts of the job that you don't like doing anyway. When you talk about companies, it really runs the gamut. There are some, Suffolk has a chief data officer who's a really accomplished person. Then you've got other companies who are concerned about it and are quite sophisticated, but maybe don't have that kind of a person built out of that kind of a department. I rarely find people who have let me rephrase. I've never come across someone who has their head in the sand. Literally, we talked to dozens of companies and people. Everyone is alive to this. They're all making decisions. Does my business need this? Can I push this off? Should I adopt it now? Is there advantage in getting ahead of other people? So a lot of this is what the individual company wants to do in terms of where their strengths and weaknesses and where their strategy as a business is. So I don't think the idea that construction is a slow adopter of technology helps anybody. Because I'll tell you, there are no accountants that are using drones, 3D modeling, and laser scans. So there's a lot of technology being adopted. There's a lot of people who have really gone. We're talking in 2-3 years from I don't know what data is other than charts to really being pretty good at it. So I think there's a lot of movement. Nobody is sitting on their hands with this.
Yeah,
a lot to learn, and at the same time, it's worth keeping in mind that construction is a dangerous, high-risk business in terms of things changing and variability. People optimize to cover that risk. Like they have processes in place to make sure they've got their arms around risk. So when you change something fundamental, it's not a light decision. So I think it's worth respecting the fact that you're asking people to shift things that have an impact on their ability to really get their arms around their risk. And I think everyone who's providing software or technology to a contractor has to recognize they're changing the risk equation, and you need to be there for them to help them think about how that's going to affect things.
So, technology, how do you do more with less people is, part of this conversation. I think in my opening monologue, we talked about how, the workforce isn't coming back potentially. I mean, we still got to talk to the youth, as we were talking about. I mean, we still need a workforce. But talk to me a little bit about how technology is not taking the jobs of the people that are already in the space. And are they going to help the people already in the space do more because there is less people? Is that kind of where you're going?
It is. And if you think about what goes into a job, you can kind of say there's some things that are just process and are moving things around or finding things or, writing some things that you can automate without taking away what only a human can do. And look, there is no AI out there that has intuition, that has the ability to see knock-on effects. So like I change this and it changes 50 other things that I need to ask questions about. There's no AI that can do that right now, and it's unlikely to be true anytime soon. But there's another more fundamental thing that AI doesn't do that humans naturally do, and that's question itself. So one of the big problems with AI right now, the modern kind of large language models, is they'll say things with total confidence that they made up. It's called hallucinations, which I think is a funny word for it. And so at the end of the day, there aren't a lot of things where we can't have a human in the loop, where we can just let the AI go do its thing. There just really aren't a lot of times when that's true. So what we're finding is AI is good at doing the minion stuff. It's good at doing the automatable things, going and finding things, summarizing, so on. And it's, it can look pretty sophisticated, but it's not the end product. It's not the decision. It's the what feeds into the decision, if that makes sense. So the fact is, look, on the demographics don't sneak up on you. Like the 20-year-olds of today were born 20 years ago. So we know from our own population studies the 25 to 29-year-old group of people is the largest we're probably ever going to have in the US in terms of number of kids. And every 5-year cohort after that gets fewer and fewer. And again, this doesn't sneak up on you. We can see the data right now. There's nowhere that we're going to bring immigrants from, even if we were open to that, which I think at the moment we're less than we might have been before. So there's no demographic plug. There was a moment when Mexico had a lot of young people. That was about 20 years ago. They don't now. So even if we wanted to, we can't. So really, there is no demographic solution to this. So we have to say, what do we do instead? Well, there's an interesting thing that came up in I want to say the 80s. It's a guy named Robert Solow is an economist, and he said, look, we've been investing in IT for 30 years at that point. And where's the productivity? What they found was process hadn't changed enough. And that speaks to where we are right now is you can plug in all the software you want, but if it's not changing how you do things, there's going to be a limit on how much better it is. I've heard people say that adopting Procore, for example, is up to 50% productivity for certain things. I mean, it's meaningful. There aren't a lot of hits like that. There aren't a lot of times where you're going to see a big jump without changing your underlying process. So I think what you're going to see is AI will change process. At first, AI will replace things the way people do them. But over time, we'll say we don't have to do it the way people do it. We can actually do it a different way that only AI could do, either because it's doing it overnight or, if I can take an AI agent and make 5 of them, suddenly things that you'd never be able to pay a human to do, like checking every one of your drawings for clashes, things that are hugely labor intensive, you suddenly can do that you never could do with a human. Whereas eyeballing something and just kind of detecting an issue, AI is pretty far away from.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot lately on this show is data, AI. Where do companies start? And you're right. I mean, we do have, drones, and we have, IR and all the LiDAR scanning and all the things that we're seeing. But we see most of that on the, mid to larger companies. It's now becoming more affordable to the smaller companies as well, such as, digital twins and what have you, BIM. I think the biggest question that a lot of people have when we talk about, data and AI is, where does a company start, right? Especially with AI. AI is new. Where do they start? Like, what do they start looking at? They already have data, but are they capturing that data the way they need to be capturing it? What is your thoughts on that?
So I think it's important to recognize there are kind of two types of AI that people are talking about right now. One of them is the older one, which is deep learning. And that's where having your data house in order makes the most sense, because you're going to feed it into models. What's interesting about the more recent ChatGPT large language model scenario is you don't need to have your data in anywhere near the same level of kind of hygiene as you do for deep learning. So I think what I would suggest companies start with is take a look at the process and imagine what you can pull away from, especially your junior people. So, you know, when someone gets a little more senior, they're applying a lot of experience and a lot of intuition. And right now, that's just not where AI is. But when you look at the things that even senior people actually have to do, that are kind of rote documentation and document flows and you know, having to write something from scratch. One of the things that ChatGPT and its ilk allow is you never have a blank sheet of paper again. You can always ask it to at least get you started. So ask yourself, when am I writing reports? When am I writing RFIs? When am I summarizing things? How much do I have to go look at PDFs and pull information out of them? That's one of the things the link does, is you can dump all your specs into our system and just ask it questions and it'll find what you're looking for. So I think I would start with process before you get too deep into technology. Technology is just a tool to help you get your job done. So if you start thinking about your job and separate out roles into tasks, so you say, I've got a PE. What do I expect the PE to do? Well, this, and this. All right, some of this stuff I need a human to do because it's just too variable and it's too messy. But other things, every time it's the same thing. Well, all right, let's see if an AI can help us with that. And there are people all over that'll help you test and kind of, you know, demo some things.
You know, we just had a very dear friend in the industry, Jerry McCahey, who just recently passed away, unfortunately, but he was a big proponent in the industry. And he always used to say that we do not have a labor problem. He says we have a process problem. What's your thoughts?
I think he's right. And where I was going with that Robert Solow thing about, they called it the productivity paradox. And what happened again in the 90s is manufacturing went through this huge change in process. There were some things at the corporate level, the core competence of the corporation and so on, where they really looked at process. And as a result, the 90s had some of the highest productivity growth in US history. So I think that there's a real opportunity for construction to say, at the contractor level, of course, and even below that, even at the PX and below level, to say, how are we doing things and how can I peel things off that waste time and drive people nuts? Because the other thing is, a lot of the stuff that AI can automate and help you with drives people a little nuts anyway. How many times have you heard the superintendent or the PM who's up till 8 p.m. getting paperwork done and can't spend time with his kids or her kids? Wouldn't it be nice if you can automate some of that and they spend more time thinking about hard stuff? Like, how am I going to handle this group of people and schedule things that take more subtlety and intuition than, you know, filling out daily reports and so on.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's where everybody's really looking at AI. Again, it comes down to, I mean, even I use it. Like, I got to write an important email or something, and I want it to really sound professional. And, you know, writing is not my forte. That's like putting a spreadsheet in front of me. That's not my forte either. This is what I do well, you know, and use it as such. But what you're saying is that the AI can be trained for the business, and that's something, you know, that I want to talk about, to take some of the menial tasks that keep you busy and away from your family and simplify those to give you your life back.
It's like you get a first draft.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to sit there and say, how should I start this? Instead, it's like you've got a junior person or an assistant who does a first draft that's never right, but it gives you a starting point to adapt from, instead of saying, oh, I don't know, I should do this and that. And the other thing that's interesting is, how many times have you had someone give you advice that on its own wasn't right, but got your brain going towards the right direction? Crazy enough, you can ask ChatGPT and its ilk crazy questions like, you know, how should I deal with a difficult to work with person? Often it'll give you pretty dry answers, but it still opens your mind to things and gets you going. So think of it as augmenting you. And again, you never have a white sheet of paper again in your life if you don't want it.
Yeah, for sure. Earlier, you mentioned, you know, failure modes, the trade-off triangle, data, accuracy, complexity. Let's kind of work through that. Like, what are the big failures you see people that are making, that are trying to jump on this?
I think when I say failure modes, what I mean is that AI isn't a silicon brain. It's not a human that's faster and whatever. It is fundamentally different how it works. What that means is it surprises us in what it gets wrong. I often tell the example of a image recognition project someone did a couple of years ago. They trained it on how to identify different dog breeds, and it kept getting stuck on huskies and wolves. And a human would look at that and say, "Oh, obviously the huskies look kind of like wolves. I could see how you'd make that error." But it turned out that the AI only had been fed information where both huskies and wolves had snow in the background. So it was keying off of snow, not anything intrinsic to the animal. That speaks to the fact that you don't always know quite why it's making the decision it is. And because you don't always know that, you're not going to be able to predict how it gets it wrong. You know, we as humans have a thing called theory of mind. So I can imagine what Dave is thinking, or at least how your brain works enough to kind of interpret what you do and guess why you may or may not have made a mistake or said something or so on. We kind of can't do that with AI, and it's a problem when you try to, because you're going to trust it more than it deserves to be trusted. So an example of a failure mode that's not from construction, there was a famous case like 6 months ago of a lawyer who had ChatGPT write his closing arguments, and it's so convincing and so confident. It included cases that don't exist, but it was all formatted the right way, but it made them up. And it does this because it's worth knowing that large language models and the foundation models, that is this kind of new wave of AI, they're trained to fill in blanks. So they're given a paragraph, and then they pull out a part of the paragraph, and they train it to predict what should have been there. That's its job, is to predict paragraphs and sentences and pages based on what was missing. So as a result, its whole thing is to guess what should have been there. Now, in its memory, it may have the right answer, and you see that a lot, and then you get the right answer. If there's nothing in its memory, it's going to say, well, I think it's what should have been there. But it doesn't do it in a way humans do, which is, I'm not really sure, but this looks right. No, it's going to sound just like it does when it really knows the answer, in which case you don't know whether it really knows the answer. You just know it sounds awfully confident. So when you think about these failure modes, that's the big thing, is a human has to be in the loop and has to give it a sniff test. That is not going away anytime soon. Is somebody senior or somebody seasoned looking at things and saying, this looks right to me, or this looks off, let's go ask it.
Well, I mean, that's kind of interesting, right? Because it picks up everything that's already been trained to pick up in the background. But like with the whole lawyer thing, you know, I mean, these are mistakes that, especially that one, I think that person got disbarred for using it or what have you. It doesn't double check its work.
That's right. That's right. Unless you ask it to. The other thing that we're not good at yet is recognizing that these things are actually supposed to be used as if you're talking to a person, right, not as if you're doing a Google search. So what people are building into software is having it automatically ask itself, was that right? Can you show me the source? So in our case, whenever we're using an LLM, you can see the spec or the document that it came from. You can click through and make sure it's actually giving you the answer you want if that's what you're looking for. So I think for the moment, we are going to want to have the ability to double check always.
So an LLM, what does that mean?
Large language model is what most people are seeing, and it's a different way of building AI from classic deep learning. There's a whole architecture thing they did called a transformer, and that's what I was telling you before. They pull a piece out and it predicts something from within a sentence, or in some cases graphics and visuals and so on.
Would all of this be part of when you said the power and pearl of AI?
Yeah. I think, you know, the power of it is that you're able to do things that you couldn't do before, right, either faster, or it's going to amplify human intelligence, unquestionably. The peril is if you're trusting it when it's not ready to be trusted yet. You're giving it too much autonomy. One of the things you hinted at a moment ago is level of accuracy. So in AI, the whole thing is, how accurate is this? And right now it's pretty good, but it's not 100% accurate. And a way of thinking about the accuracy, and especially when you're building something, is what I call the trade-off triangle. So in professional services, everyone's used to quality, time, and budget as the sort of trade-off. Well, think about that in AI. You've either got the size of your problem. So I'm asking it to write a whole book. That's a big problem versus answering a small question. The next one is data. How much have I put into it? How much have I trained it on? And the third thing is accuracy. So how accurate do I need? So is it a big problem with a lot of data? Do I need it to be super accurate, or is it okay if it's not so accurate? So you're going to have to trade those things off. Typically, the way people answer that is they make it so that the problem is as narrow as possible. The best way to get reliability at the moment, for most people anyway, is to make the problem as small as you think you can, even if you need to ask the question more than once or have more than one model going on. An example of that, Google's got like 5,000 models in production, and they don't have 5,000 products. So they use different little models to answer smaller, narrower problems rather than having to grow one big model that can do everything, because it tends not to work.
Hugh, how long have you been writing code for AI and teaching AI how to work? I mean, you've been at this as one of the originals for a long time now.
Yeah, I don't actually code it. There's people that are way smarter than me that do that. I actually will often organize the data and so on. But I've been at this since about 2015.
Since about 2015. Let's get into what the link is real quick here. I'm going to put it on the screen. Talk to us a little bit about what is the link AI and what does it do?
Yeah, so our fundamental kind of reason for being is that specs are valuable, but they're really big, and they're often not written in a way that's very consumable. So we do a number of things. We've got a submit-a-log product. We've got this collaboration hub that allows teams to kind of dig into the spec and get their arms around it. Then, of course, we've got a large language model product we call spec.ai or spec-GPT. All of them, though, are focused on this idea of how do we make specs into an asset and not something that is, frankly, an impediment for a lot of people.
Right.
You know, it's really hard to go into a spec and find the answer you're looking for. We make it as easy as asking a question. And over time, what you're going to find is more and more workflows kind of hanging off of what is originally in a spec, to make it more and more powerful and you know, easy for people to find what they're looking for. Starting with, towards the end of the year, the ability to actually assess a spec and start to look for errors in it. Because the problem with spec, they're so big that individuals often have errors in the spec itself. And that drives contractors nuts, is that they see a spec and they see a part of it that clearly isn't for that project, is it's kind of save as from the last project. So we're getting really good at identifying parts of a spec that look like they don't deserve to be there, or kind of refer to something that doesn't exist, and so on.
So somebody that's going to hire the link, what is it they would expect to do when they work with you?
It depends a little on what they need, but we are helping you know, project teams to manage their submittal logs, really get their arms around pre-buyout and even post-buyout. And then during the course of a job, having on their tablet or wherever it is, the ability to ask a question to the spec as easy as you go and look at Google Maps. So for us, it's kind of like the analogy of you know, of the old Rand McNally maps that nobody uses unless you're going, you know, 1,000 miles away,
right,
to Google Maps, which you check if you're going down the road to get milk. For us, I want a superintendent, I want the PM, even if they're a little unsure, to say, you know what, I'm just going to double check. And the double checking is as fast as asking a question, and up the answer comes and says, oh no, that's what it is. So that for us is the win, is that at your fingertips is the exact answer you're looking for, with the ability to click on it. And if you want to double check, you can see the spec itself. But we've helped you navigate to that answer instead of needing to flip through, you know, hundreds and thousands of pages.
So, but let's shift gears a little bit here. So how does this impact safety? I mean, you mentioned earlier the paperwork drag that keeps people, you know, at the office late at night, missing family events, etc. Is there a correlation between what you're doing at the link and construction efficiency and safety?
I think not directly, quite honestly, other than being able to make people, you know, part of what you can put into the link is any set of construction documents, including your safety plan and your safety policy. That said, when people, you know, assume they know the spec and they get it wrong, it leads to rework, and rework is a huge source of safety issues. So I think that indirectly 100%, if we can reduce rework and the kind of rush that it takes to kind of get rework done, I think it'll have a positive impact on safety for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Or if people aren't staying up all hours of the night trying to get their work done because they have a little bit of AI help, they're not tired and making mistakes somewhere else as well.
Oh, I also think it's just quality of not only safety, I think it's quality of decision-making. If people have a little more time to think about a thing, talk to people about things, or to your point, are rested, but also, you know, how many people have kids they see less of than they wish? So there's a whole bunch of things that hopefully we're helping people with.
So who are some of the leaders in this space right now who embrace, you know, AI and machine learning and all of those things?
In construction or more generally?
Yeah, I think in construction. I mean, even generally, because we can learn from other industries for sure.
We can. I think I would start with construction. You know, so obviously we're talking about this a lot. I mentioned before that Most contractors have their eye on it. Some are a little further ahead than others. The ones that I know that are further ahead than others are the kind of usual suspects. As I mentioned before, Suffolk has a chief data officer, and what that implies about being prepared for AI in its various forms is right, is that they're ahead of the game in terms of their internal data, but also you don't just pop AI in and hope it works. There's infrastructure you want under it to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. I find our friends at DPR are doing some similar things, a little bit less on the data side and a little bit more on the standard side. Now, they may be doing things in data, I'm just less aware of it. But they're thinking about process in a way that is, I think, really open and amenable to AI. Beyond that, there's a number of startups that are doing some interesting things. On the contract side, there's a company called Black Boiler who actually is doing a session with me in 2 days. Document Crunch does some things with contract review and so forth. Right. Alice Technologies has done some interesting things with kind of replicating how buildings get built, so you can simulate how a plan might work. Out of the UK, there's a company called Nplan who's done some of the most sophisticated AI work I've come across, much more on the deep learning side. Sure. So that's a good smattering of folks. But man, it's bubbling everywhere. Like you just can't escape it. The crazy thing, though, Dave, is the speed of change in AI, in this round of AI, is unlike anything I've seen in 30 years in technology. Like it's a breakneck pace. There's more money chasing it. And what's really important is the first round of deep learning AI was sort of like, we all kind of were really slow to figure out what to do with it. This round comes when there's like 1 million engineers that understand it. And there's, lots of product people that understand it. So way more fertile ground. And also, I think that the prize is more clearly understood than maybe it was the first time around. So between the pace of what OpenAI, Meta, Stanford, and people around the world, it's unprecedented.
So we're going to hop to some comments here in just a second, Hugh, but is there anything before we do that we didn't cover that you really want people to know about, Hugh Seaton and what the link is up to?
Well, we're doing great stuff, and I'm wide open talking to anybody about both what we do, of course, but AI generally. We view ourselves as in a leadership position in terms of just thinking about it and helping people to understand it at a ground level. I talk to contractors all the time for free, just a free consultation. What's up? How can I help you? How can I help your team? I would also say that for those who want to get a little bit deeper without having to learn to code, go to deeplearning.ai. There's some free courses. They're about an hour each. They'll tell you about the specifics of how some of this stuff works, and it's free. So, again, you need to be a little nerdy for that, but it's not too bad. And you can watch what they're talking about and learn a lot. I would suggest everybody check that out if they're interested in going a little deeper.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you on all the above on that. Let me hop over to some comments and some questions here real quick. Give me 1 second and I will get right into it. So we got the first one here from Greg Ugaldi. Dave and Jen, it's great to hear Hugh outline tools to address some of the common industry themes, explaining terms, adding to effectiveness, and addressing paperwork, etc. Greg Ugaldi is the chair of the National Association of Home Builders, or immediate past chair, I should say. Guide updates, President of the United States. And then, of course, Henry Mickelberg is back. And yes, Henry, it was not AI that stopped us from being late on the show today. It was smoke alarms going off in the apartment complex. So one thing after another. But he did write a book, as Henry typically does. So let's put it up here and I'll read it real quick. Absolutely, there are significant efficiencies in using NLP and ML in construction, which IMHO is where there will be a replacement of siloed rules. Less quantity surveyors can't hurt, right? I think that AI, as a panacea of knowing more than humans and can therefore make informative decisions, is starting to get there with Slate AI. Alibit, it is predicated upon good data in and out. So question. Thanks for the question, Henry. Where does you think ML stops and AI starts in construction?
I really like that question. I'm going to take ML as deep learning, and because it's sort of one of them is really based on data and the other one's a little fuzzier. I think here's an interesting hot take. I think that generative AI, which is what I take him to mean by AI, is going to allow us to create the data to do classic deep learning. And what deep learning is good at is recognizing a thing, predicting a thing, usually narrower problems. Right. But often that's where your messy data is an issue. And what I think you're going to be able to do is train generative AI to go and find dark data, extract the entities, which is what there's actually a term of art, from your PDFs, from your RFIs, and so on, organize the data so that it can be fed into a deep machine learning algorithm. So I think that the two will work together. To answer your question more directly, though, machine learning, and again, by that we mean deep learning, is good at a narrow set of things, and that's recognizing, at classifying, and so on. Whereas generative AI is better at things that require context, whether it's summarizing something or it's producing something like we talked about with, never a white sheet or blank sheet of paper. So I think those two are quite distinct. One of them is almost like super duper software, and it should be compared to software. Whereas generative AI is a little closer to being cognitive and doing things that kind of approach thinking. And I think as it gets better, which you're seeing rapidly, you're going to start comparing what generative AI can do versus what a junior person can do more than you ever should with deep learning. Hopefully that's clear, that one is a little more about context and a little bit more nuanced, and the other one is just recognizing things, predicting things, and so on. And I think you're going to, like I say, I think you're going to find generative AI has real applications in turning dark and unstructured data into something you can feed into a model.
Excellent. Thanks for the book and the question. Always good to see you, Henry. Thanks so much for that. Peter Molnar. Hey, Peter. AI for AI. All right. Gotta love him.
Never heard that before.
Douglas says, hey, Doug, what does an AI tech stack look like if you have an Unreal Engine at the top, AutoCAD in the middle, and output to factory? Do you think most AI tech from design to factory will be on off-the-shelf solution?
That's a pretty deep one. I think it speaks right now to the need for human in the loop. I don't think that AI, let me think about that. Essentially what you'd be saying is you're using Unreal and or a similar interface to create. AutoCAD translates it into something that is halfway to a drawing, and then AI then translates it into whatever's needed for the fabrication and or factory. Essentially DFMA translator almost. I do think you could find that. I absolutely think it's going to be a while before it can do that without a human eyeballing it. I think you're going to find weird places where it feels like there's two imperatives or two parts of it. That just happens in AI a lot, is that surprising conflicts show up that a human would have not even noticed, would have just automatically kind of dealt with. So I do think that that's an interesting way of looking at it. And as I say, I think you'd kind of train a model on a DFMA sort of thing, specific to whatever machinery you're using. So I see it happening for sure. Someone has to invest in that, and you got to figure out, again, how to catch unexpected errors early. And sometimes they may be subtle errors that aren't so easy. So one of the things that I didn't mention before, people have been using AI like against itself, or against AI in the past. They're called adversarial models. There's a few other things. I think you're going to wind up with AI as pairs or AI as teams, where one is generating the idea or generating the content, and another one is assessing it and or kind of playing devil's advocate. Right. I think that sort of tag team thing is very likely. It's not so easy to do because they could both be stupid, but I think you'll see it.
AI can be stupid. Is that what you just said?
I think we get duped into thinking it's a lot smarter than it is because its writing is so clean, clear, and well formatted. But ultimately, it's really stupid. It's really narrow and genius in its little area. The second you're not in that area, it's really stupid. And that's true for all of them right now. They're still way more narrow than we think. There's no little voice in the back of its head saying, was that right? Right. And it doesn't understand how the world works.
Hugh, is there anything you want to leave us with before we wrap up today?
Dave, this has been a pleasure as always. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and thanks everybody out there. Listen, appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you commenting. And remember, it's Monday, so we got 5 more days, well, 4.5, to build it better. So get back out there and do what you do best. I'm Dave Cooper. We'll see you Wednesday, 1 p.m. Hugh, don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you after the outro. And the rest of you, please go and make sure you say thanks to these sponsors as well. What an amazing show. Thank you to all of our sponsors for helping us to continue to bring all of these innovative conversations to all of you out there. Please visit them, see what they have to offer you, and as always, subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that bell. It would mean the world to us. I'm Dave Cooper. Thanks for